Hello, hello. Happy Wednesday. Jamie here. Hope everybody's doing well. Today, we're going to be talking all about PPP forgiveness. So it's been a while actually since we've talked about this, but a lot of people are getting to the point now where it is time for them to hopefully be able to apply for forgiveness soon. So we want to talk about what we need to do. So real quick, just to level set while I wait for you guys to join live. I'm Jamie Troll. I'm a financial literacy coach and profit strategist. I have pivoted my business to really be helping people primarily through this coronavirus craziness that we are still, smack dab in the middle of. So I am currently live in 3 different places. You can catch me in my Financial Literacy for Women Business Owners group. If you're not over there, if you're over watching me on YouTube, click the link below, join the community. We've got thousands of us over there talking about all the things. I'm also live on my Balance CFO Facebook page. Please make sure you like my page because it feels like a hug to an entrepreneur when you like when you like or subscribe. And if you're watching me on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to give me a hug because we can't actually give each other hugs right now, you guys. So that's a hug to me. So hope everybody is doing well today. I see you guys joining. Oh, good. We've got quite a few people. Hi, Jeannie. Hey, guys. I can't see all of your names. Hi, Stacy. Okay, great. So awesome. We've got people joining. Okay. So just hopefully my internet holds up today. I'm a little concerned only because we have all of us on the house currently using some form. My husband's on a Zoom. My son is doing first grade on a Zoom. My daughter, I think might be on YouTube right now. I don't really know. She's not in here. That's the important thing. So anyway, hopefully the signal holds up because it's been a little spotty lately. I know some of you guys know what that's like. Yes, Jesse, there will be a replay for this today. All of these are always able to be replayed either where you're watching them on Facebook or over on YouTube. Okay, so today we are talking PPP forgiveness. So many of you guys, I'm assuming if you're here, you got the PPP loan and now you're wondering, okay, what do I do now? Okay, what do I do now? So a lot of you guys might also be coming up on, especially if you chose kind of the 8 weeks, you're probably coming up on or already done with that. You might be well into your 24 weeks too, or even completed with that almost at this point. So I think we are at that point. Now, the very first thing I want to talk about here is before you even get into applying for forgiveness, many banks are not yet taking forgiveness applications. Some are, but many are not. Why are many of them not? Well, because we're still waiting on Congress to give us all the info. So for example, the big thing that we're really waiting on, we have forgiveness applications. We know how that should work, right? There are rules and regulations around it. Those came out in June. So you would think the banks would be ready at this point. But the big outstanding thing right now is this idea of blanket forgiveness. Meaning, if you got a loan where the value of that loan was $150,000 or less, right now there is a proposal that you would get blanket forgiveness. The banks are pushing for this as well. They actually were the ones to really bring it up because these loans, the smaller loans, are the majority of the loans that were given. Not the majority of the money, but the majority of the actual number of loans that were given are these smaller loans. So ultimately, they want to get rid of all the paperwork. There is an easy form, which makes it slightly easier in some instances to apply for forgiveness, but it's still a heck of a lot of paperwork for the banks. It's a heck of a lot of the paperwork for people. So the hope is that they pass something that will streamline that. Now, what would happen with blanket forgiveness? Would that just mean everybody automatically gets their loan forgiven if it was under $150,000? No. You would likely still have to apply, but the application process may be as simple as checking a box to certify something like the fact that you tried to use it or you made your best efforts to use it in the way that you were supposed to. We don't know yet what that certification would look like. If this bill were to pass, okay, if we were to get blanket forgiveness and Congress were to pass that in the next stimulus, which hopefully is coming at some point, then what would happen is Treasury would actually be the one to then come out with what that certification would look like. So It's not just going to be a free-for-all that you're automatically forgiven. They're going to rely on you to give some information to do that. So that's kind of the big thing. And some banks are waiting. They're like, I don't want to take all this paperwork. I mean, I don't blame them when they're like, shoot, if this is going to be as simple as checking a box, I would rather wait for that than take these applications now and deal with all the extra paperwork and work that they're going to have to put in. So a lot of banks have taken the stance that, you know what, we're just going to wait. I don't know how long they're going to be able to wait. If we don't get something together on this soon, likely they're going to have to start taking these. And some banks already have started taking applications. But it is important to think about timing of when you are applying for forgiveness. And it's also important to think about timing to make of specifically if you have employees, there's some timing considerations around when you apply to make sure you can maximize your forgiveness. I should have linked it. I actually wrote an article for Gusto on their blog about timing of applying for forgiveness. If anybody's on here that knows that blog, I would love if you guys would share it. And I'll put it in the details after this, because I think that's a really helpful thing too, to talk about when do I apply? When is the best time for me to apply? Okay, let me see. So April says, I think so many are confused thinking it's going to be blanket forgiveness versus you still probably have to use it like it was intended and certify that. Yes. So the way that it's written, you would still have to use it as intended. It's not like you can just go use it for whatever, you want to, and you would get that money forgiven. That would actually still be fraudulent. That's why they're going to want you to certify it. That's the thing that, they want you to take on that risk to say, yes, I use this, even if maybe, you didn't quite use it exactly 100% right, but you tried your best, right? You tried to follow the rules. That's probably what that certification is going to look like. It's not going to be the full certification that's currently in that PPP forgiveness application, which is like a whole page of things you have to write your life away to, right? But they're gonna make you do something. Believe you me, it's not just gonna automatically be gone. I would not imagine. Annette's got me. Thank you. So you guys, if you want to write this down, this is the blog article for Gusto, and I'll put this in the descriptions after I'm done. But if you're wondering about timing, because right now we're going to talk about things that impact forgiveness, timing is one of them. But this goes into even more specific detail about timing of applying. This is really useful, especially if you're an employer and you're trying to figure out, timing of when you're employing people and the rules around that to make sure you get forgiven. Make sure you go check out that article. I'll leave it up for a minute so that you guys can write that down if you want to. Okay. So let's talk about, I've really struggled with how to talk about this, because here's what happens with PPP forgiveness. I'll give you a glimpse into my world. This is all day, every day. I get messages or see questions that are basically people giving me a snippet of their situation and then saying, will my PPP loan be forgiven? And the answer is often a little bit more complicated than that, if that makes sense. The answer to that is usually, there's not a quick answer in most cases. In some cases there is, but especially if you're an employer, the answer is it's complicated. And that is one of the things where I want to kind of walk you through some decision points to see where you might fit and to see kind of what you need to be looking at. So that's really what I want you guys to be walking through is sort of these decision points. So the very first decision point, first let's talk about the three things that can impact your forgiveness and make it so that you don't get fully forgiven. Let's first talk about that, okay? So number one, the very first thing that can impact it is if you don't spend all the money, right? If you don't spend all the money, you're not going to get it all forgiven. So they're going to ask you when you apply for forgiveness, hey, what'd you spend this money on? And you need to tell them, and you have to spend it all. And at least 60% of that has to go to payroll. I think some people thought as long as they spend the 60% on payroll, that they can spend the 40% on whatever else, or they don't have to spend the rest and be fully forgiven. You have to spend it all during your covered period, which starts when you get the money for the most part, right? It starts when you get the money. You can't just hold on and hope your 24 weeks starts, 3 months down the line. Doesn't really work that way. So if you don't spend all the money, you're not going to get it all forgiven. Okay. So, so that is something that's really important to know. That's the first thing that can impact your forgiveness. If you don't spend it all, you're not going to get it all forgiven. Could you get a portion of it forgiven? Yes. It's not all or nothing. None of this is all or nothing. Okay. Unless you don't spend a single dollar on payroll, you'll probably get a portion of it at least forgiven. But everybody that follows me, I want y'all to get 100% forgiveness. I'm going to bat 1,000 for people who follow me and watch my content, because you can manage this. Pretty much everybody will be able to manage this if they follow the rules. Okay, so let's talk about number two. Number two reason you may not get your loan fully forgiven. It relates to your FTE count. Okay. Your FTE count. What's an FTE? It's your full-time equivalent employees. All right. So calculating that, and I've done some, I'm not going to go super deep on this because I have some other resources on this, but basically a full-time employee is 40 hours a week. So therefore the calculation would be if somebody works 20 hours a week, they're half an employee, right? If somebody works 10 hours a week, they're 0.25 of an employee. That's the calculation of your FTE count. And what they're going to do is they're going to look at, and you're actually going to do, they don't do it, you actually have to do it, is they're going to compare your FTE average, okay, during your covered period with your reference period. So your FTE count, we're going to get a little bit more into this here in a minute, but your FTE count really does, it's probably the most important piece of this, is really paying attention to your FTE count, and that's what can impact timing. Okay, so we'll get into that a little bit more, but know that your FTE count matters. So if you go and lay off all your employees, even if if you lay off half your employees, even if you are able to spend all that money on the other half of your employees, because we have 24 weeks, right? So it's theoretically possible we could pay them for that 24 weeks with that money. If you laid off half your employees and didn't hire them back, you're probably not going to get it fully forgiven. But we'll talk about some exceptions to that here in a minute. And then the third reason that you could not have your loan fully forgiven is related to reducing average hourly or salary wages. Now, this is important because I think people thought for a long time that this mattered from you had to make up commissions and tips and all that variable compensation. This is solely on the base wages you pay your employees. So that's if you pay them $15 an hour, that's $15 an hour, right? If you pay them an annual salary of $40,000, that's $40,000. Okay. So if you reduce that average hourly wage or that average annual salary by more than 25% on an employee by employee basis, and you do actually have to go employee by employee in kind of the full forgiveness application, okay? If you do that, you have to make sure that you have not reduced it by more than 25%. If you have, that can impact your forgiveness. Again, though, there are things that you can do. It's not all is lost if you did that during your time period. There are things that you can do to help you and get you back to where you need to be. In my experience, I've found talking to most of you guys, I don't think, not a ton of people were reducing actual wages, right? You weren't cutting people's salaries necessarily, maybe in some cases. And the salary cut only applies to employees who make under $100,000. If they were over $100,000, you can cut their salary all day long. But if they make under that, that's where this kicks in. And that doesn't seem to be as big of a hot button. Most of you guys kept their salary the same, or maybe their wages, their hourly wages the same, but you cut their hours. So if you cut their hours, that doesn't impact you on this wages side. That impacts you on the full-time equivalent side, right? On the FTE count side. Because if you had a full-time employee that now is only a part-time employee, that's going to impact your calculations. Okay, so those are really the three things. So let's just recap on the three things that can impact your forgiveness. Number one, not using the whole amount. You got to use the whole amount on the right things, and 60% has to go to payroll. If you're self-employed, typically you can use the whole thing on yourself. We'll talk about that in a minute. Number two, your FTE count is reduced from your previous FTE count. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that too. And number 3, you reduced average annual salary or hourly wages per employee by more than 25%. Those are the 3 things. Now, again, it's not like, oh, shoot, I did that. All is lost. Even if your time period is over, okay? Even if your time period is over, then you still have things that you can do. Even if you did it totally wrong during your whole 8 or 24 weeks, there are still things that you can do to get full forgiveness. So that's some of the stuff they added with the PPP Flexibility Act in June that basically was trying to give more ability for people to be able to get their loans forgiven. Okay, real quick. This is a good question, Mark. Yes, EIDL Advance also reduces forgiveness. So that's kind of one you can't control. So the other 3 you can control. The EIDL Advance will reduce your forgiveness if you received an advance, not a loan, but if you received an advance, i.e. the free money that was $1,000 per employee. So let's say you got a $50,000 PPP loan and a $3,000 EIDL advance, and you get your whole loan forgiven. Yay, my whole $50,000 would be forgiven. You're actually only going to get $47,000 forgiven. The other $3,000, you can either pay it back right away once kind of all the dust settles, or that turns into a loan over your PPP terms, which are 2 or 5 years, depending on when you got the loan. So yes, so that is the one thing that will impact it, but you can't really control that, right? So you do have to still spend the money to get full forgiveness. So a lot of people think, well, I'll just only spend $47,000 in the money. Well, if you only spend $47,000 and then you're forgiven $47,000, they're still going to reduce the $3,000 off that. So then you only get $44,000. So you still have to spend the PPP, the full amount of the PPP, in the way you're supposed to get the whole thing forgiven. And then your EIDL advance comes off of that. Great question here. Is there a deadline to turn in the forgiveness application? Yes. So you need to apply for forgiveness. You actually have a while. I think a lot of people were worried that they were going to get stuck with these loans, and that's what's driving a lot of the desire to get this kind of out of the way, which I understand. You got 10 months from the end of your 8 or 24-week covered period. So once your time is up, right, you have 10 months from then to actually apply for forgiveness. I don't really recommend waiting. I am curious to see how all of that plays out from a taxation perspective at the end of the year when people are filing their taxes without getting their PPP loans forgiven. That's going to be a total cluster, just to be honest. But you do have 10 weeks to apply or 10 months, sorry, important difference, 10 months. So almost a year from the end of your covered period. So don't, get all worried or have any consternation if your bank hasn't really opened up the portal yet. It's probably not a huge deal unless you fall into one of those categories where, you are trying to get safe harbor. That can impact timing as well. But we'll get into that in just a minute. I talked about this at the front end. No, I mean, it's still being talked about. It's still part of kind of the broader plan for stimulus, but it's all caught up in Congress. This is for the PPP loan. So this is important. This is for the PPP loan. So I don't know what you mean by SBA. Both EIDL and PPP are SBA loans. This is PPP loan. You have to spend it to be forgiven for it. Okay. All right. So, and what about sole props? I will jump into that. Okay, so those are the 3 things that could impact forgiveness. Let's get a little bit more down into the nitty-gritty of that. All right, so here's the decision tree. And this is something, again, I get a lot of people asking me questions about, will I be forgiven? Won't I be forgiven? Here's the decision tree I want you to go down to figure out whether or not, what you need to do next. Okay, what guidance you need to be looking at, because there's a ton of guidance out there. Let's start with self-employed people. You've never had employees. You don't have employees now. You got the PPP loan. You got the right amount of the PPP loan, i.e. you got a PPP loan that was based off of Schedule C, line 31, net profit, right? Divide that by 12 times 2.5. That's what you should have gotten. Some people got more. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if you're a self-employed person, you got the right amount of a loan, pay yourself with the whole thing. And really, I get a lot of questions about how do you pay yourself? Just pay yourself. From the forgiveness application, it doesn't matter. If you're on unemployment, then there's a little bit more complexity. Can't talk this morning. Complexity to that, where you have to kind of follow your state guidelines on how they want you to claim that. But as far as like how you actually pay yourself, and I do recommend you do pay yourself. I think it's silly. I think it's total silliness to have to pay yourself from your business account to your personal account. It doesn't really make a lot of sense from a tax perspective, but I can see banks requiring you to show proof that you paid yourself. So pay yourself all in one lump sum, pay yourself over 10 weeks, however you want to, with the full amount. You will get it forgiven if you apply. It won't be hard. You would give them your Schedule C probably, and you would say, I paid myself the full amount, maybe give them some proof of that. And it should be easy peasy lemon squeezy, honestly. So I know I've had a lot of self-employed people that are so worried they're going to do things wrong. If you get the right amount of loan, you're going to get the whole thing forgiven. The banks don't want those loans. They don't want to keep your loan. They don't want to keep your $10,000 loan on their books. They don't even keep an unforgiven $1,200 of that loan on your books. You will get that amount forgiven. If you're a self-employed person with no employees who got more than you should have, maybe the banks used your 1099, something like that, you are still limited by the rules. You can only pay yourself what amount. You go to your Schedule C in your tax return. Again, I'm talking to my self-employees, my sole proprietors, my LLCs. Schedule C, line 31. Divide that number, that's your net profit. Divide that number by 12 times 2.5. That's the max you can pay yourself out of your PPP loan. That's 2.5 months of payroll according to the powers that be. Okay. So that's what you can get forgiven for. You can, if you have extra, right? If all of a sudden you're like, well, they gave me more. There's nothing that says currently that you couldn't use that extra to go hire another W-2 employee and pay them. Doesn't work for a 1099 contractor, has to be W-2 employee, but you could go pay them, and that would be a way to use some of the money. If you have business rent or utilities or things like that, right? You can use that for up to 40% of the amount you'd get forgiven. So there are some avenues there, even if you got a little bit too much. But I would make sure you're aware of how much you definitely are going to get forgiven, and then work to get the rest of it forgiven. Okay. Let's see. So here's the interesting thing. I'm assuming you're a sole proprietor, right? So really, here's the silly thing to me, okay, is if they want to see you have proof of payment to yourself, right? If a bank wants to see that. Now, a lot of banks won't ask for that because they'll realize that's silliness, because here's what you would do, right? If it were me and I'm like, well, shoot, I need this money in my business. I got bills to pay. I don't want to pay myself all this money, right? Just to kind of check the box, I'm telling people, look, just in case you get one of those banks that gets really pedantic about this stuff, pay yourself the full amount, and then honestly put a capital contribution back into your business to pay your business bills. That's why I think the whole thing is silly, because it doesn't make any sense, right? But in theory, like they can't force you to take that money. If you need that money in your business, you need it in your business. So it's different for corps, because actually payment to yourself through W-2 wages is a taxable event. So it makes sense that they would have to pay themselves. But it doesn't make any sense for sole proprietors LLCs. But a lot of banks don't really understand kind of the intricacies there of how those very small self-employed people work. So if you didn't pay yourself, you still can. I mean, if you're still in your time period, just do that craziness. Pay yourself and then put it back in. I mean, hopefully your bank won't really care and it won't be a big deal. But ultimately, once you do that, once you kind of pay yourself, the official use is when you apply for PPP, you paid yourself with the money. Regardless of what you did with it, you paid yourself with the money. You just cut out the middleman if I paid myself, but then I actually put the money back into my business. That doesn't matter. You don't have to track all the little things that you spent with it. You paid yourself with that money. Okay. All right. So let me look at my questions for sole proprietor. Yes. So your maximum is 20,800. If you make more than 100K, you shouldn't have gotten, if you don't have employees, you should not have gotten more than that. So that should have been the max that they would have given you, is the 20,800. But some people, I mean, banks did all kinds of things. Melissa asked if I would recommend applying now or waiting. Probably waiting, because it may, again, like, it's just a little bit of extra paperwork. You could do it if you want to. You could fill out the EZ form. Everybody who's self-employed, no employees, applied with no employees, you can fill out the EZ form. It's just kind of a one-pager. It's not that much. But I think, if blanket forgiveness is passed, then there's going to be way less for you to do. And your bank might not even be taking applications at this point, or it might. So look into it. If you just want to get it done, peace of mind, go for it. But you're going to have to, you may have to give more support and things like that you won't have to give later. So it's just a matter of, your own preference. Let's see. What if you had no employees before receiving PPP and then hired a part-time employee? Will then be using 100% of the money? Will it most likely be forgiven? Yeah, absolutely. So in that case, honestly, Cheryl, I don't know if you are a sole proprietor LLC. If you are, and you hired an employee, you can pay them with PPP. I still recommend paying yourself with PPP. The reason I say that is because, like, as the official use, remember, we can't track, like, there's no orange dollars, like, but as the official use when you apply, because and I'm not going to get into all the tax consequences. Go watch my video. I have another video on YouTube. I have a whole PPP playlist on YouTube that is linked above. If you're watching me on Facebook, there's a video about getting full forgiveness for self-employed where I talk about how it's more tax advantageous if you're a sole proprietor or LLC to pay yourself all the money than to use it for paying employees or paying rent or something like that, because it'll reduce, you won't be able to take those deductions if you do that. So I still recommend the official use of it being paid to yourself, even if you hire an employee. Now, if you have extra, if you were given too much of a loan, you can use the rest of it to pay that other employee. Okay, yes. So you paid yourself first, good, and then you were overfunded. Exactly. So then, yes, go hire another employee and pay them. Great, win-win. Okay. Let's see. Do you, S Corp here, do you think that banks will give the opportunity that if they don't agree with using the EZ form, they ask for the longer application? Yeah, I mean, not be able to. So here's the thing. Here's the thing. Banks are relying on you. Most. So they've basically been absolved of, responsibility for the most part around this stuff, meaning they are going to rely on the numbers that you give them and the certifications that you make to them. That's why there's a giant one-page certification where you have to sign your life away on these things, because the banks don't want to be responsible for ticking and tying all those numbers back and forth. I would be surprised if a lot of banks push back on, if you've certified, look, this is true to me. I've certified that I can use the EZ. I've checked the boxes on why I'm using it, right? I don't foresee a lot of pushback happening. That is not the license to fraudulently use, make certifications that are not correct. But I really don't think banks are going to get crazy about this. As long as you give them the support, like, they can go on their checklist and look at, like, okay, I'm supposed to get a Schedule C, I'm supposed to get proof of payroll reports. As long as you give them the things that you're supposed to give them, you give them the calculations in the form, right? You, you sign off on your certifications. I am not expecting banks to, like, be crazy meticulous on this stuff. Okay, so that's just an important thought process where I don't think they're going to be saying, like, oh, you applied with the EZ, but I don't think you qualify, so you need to go. If you told them you did, they're probably not going to be pushing back a ton. This may vary by bank, right, as to how, specific they get about this. Importantly, the banks are the first to approve, then this stuff goes to the SBA. So how much work the SBA puts on these, we'll have to see. Again, I think they're going to take a materiality view on most of this, though, just like the banks. So they've already said the greater than 2 million are getting like a full like SBA audit. Under that, we'll have to see. But I don't think people need to worry so much about their 15,000 or even their 50,000 PPP loans, them getting like super crazy about all of this stuff. You need to do the work. You need to support it in case you ever are audited later on down the line, because that's an option too, right? Like, I think some people might be like, yes, got through the, the milestone, got my loan forgiven. This stuff can come back. So a couple years later, they're probably going to be doing these like, not like full IRS audits, but like audits of PPP for a while to make sure people are using it correctly and to catch any fraud, right? That's what they're going to be looking for primarily, is fraud, not for people who are like, I did my best, but it was confusing. I tried to keep up and, et cetera, et cetera. Y'all aren't going to be the ones that are, sitting in the risky spot. It's going to be the people that knowingly went and like bought a Porsche with the money, right? Those people exist, or like fraudulently created businesses that don't actually exist and took the money. Don't be that guy. Then you'll be okay. Okay. All right. So I do want to jump to, yes. So you can pay it how you want to. You can do it in one. There shouldn't be any risks to that. If you're on unemployment, I do suggest mirroring it up with unemployment. Take it over like 10 weeks, because it's roughly 10 weeks of pay. It's like 10 and a half weeks of pay. But look to see what your state's rules are. That matters more for unemployment than it does PPP forgiveness. For PPP forgiveness, on the application, you just say, I paid myself the amount, right? Yeah, this is true too. Like, as we've seen, the banks gave conflicting answers in the beginning. I think we're at the point now where we know a little bit more. In the very beginning, though, it was banks were giving out wrong loan amounts. Banks were asking for the wrong things. Banks were not understanding different types of businesses. I think some of that has hopefully evened out, but we're going to see some similar things when it comes to forgiveness, where different banks are going to interpret things differently as well, and they're going to get some things wrong, and that's just going to be how it works. But again, this is why I say even more, they're relying on you. Okay, they're relying on you. If you guys, this is a great time to plug. If you have not downloaded my PPP tracker. And I say mine, but it was really the brain trust of me and two other friends, Bree and Kelly, who are also CPAs, who got together and spent an insane amount of time putting together this spreadsheet to make it easier for you to apply for forgiveness and to calculate out the amounts to make sure that you are on track to be fully forgiven, right? And even give you some things that you can do if you're not. Download it. balancecfo.com/PPP tracker. I don't know why I didn't put that on the tagline either. Somebody's got me on that, right? balancecfo.com/PPP tracker. So Bree, you can get me. I see you're on here, so you can write it. So anyway, that is, where I would start if you're not sure if you're going to get forgiven. Okay. If you're self-employed, you should be fine. But if you have employees, so that's kind of decision point one. Self-employed, you should be okay. If you have employees, here's what I want you to do. And this is where the conversation gets trickier. Okay. So the conversation, let me see. I'm looking for it. Here it is. There it is. That's my PPP tracker, our PPP tracker. So if you have employees, okay, here's the route to go down. Because a lot of you guys had to lay off employees, had to shut down, brought them back. Like, maybe you didn't bring them back the day you got your PPP loan, because, how realistic is that, right? Maybe you had to wait a couple of weeks for whatever reason. And you're wondering how the FTE is going to impact you. Okay. The first thing to look at is, did you keep up when you look at your average FTE over your covered period? Average FTE over 8 weeks or average FTE over 24 weeks? Look at how many full-time equivalents you had. And average means, so here's the thing that's important about this. If you got your loan, and you brought everybody back, and I'm just going to use the 8 weeks because it's easier. But if you got your loan and you waited 4 weeks, you waited a month to bring your employees back, and then you brought them all back, the exact same amount, and through the end of that 8 weeks, you were good. You were at your old range that you had in January and February of this year. Okay. So you think you're good. You're like, I brought them all back. That's what I'm supposed to do, right? When you average that out though, those first 4 weeks, you had 0 FTEs. And then let's say you had 4, the last 4 weeks, you brought back all 4. That averages to 2. Okay. So that then calculation can reduce your forgiveness. And this does not, really important, it's not the number of FTEs or the number of employees that you put on your application for PPP that matters. That doesn't matter for this, okay? That was just like a number of employees that you put on there. They use that for various different reasons. That is not something that you're tied to. A lot of people are worried like, oh, I put that I had 4, but really my FTEs is only 3.5 and I didn't realize how the count. Don't worry about what you put on your application. Throw that away. Throw that out of your mind. There are reference periods that you can use. If you grab my PPP tracker, you'll be able to pick, there are a couple different options for reference periods, but one of them is January, February of 2020. So you would look and average out January, February 2020. Okay, I had 4. And then during my 8 weeks or my 24 weeks, I had an average of 3. Uh-oh, I'm under, right? And the calculation, the PPP tracker will do all of that for you and show you that you're under. More important, probably the more people that you have. If you're under, not all is lost. Okay. That's when you go to box 3. So it's like box 1, I'm self-employed. I have no employees. Great. Box 2, what did I do with my FTEs during that covered period? Did I hit the mark? If you did, if you're good there, check that box. We're good on FTEs. You don't have to worry about FTE safe harbor. Get to that in a minute, but you've heard that word before. So that's the first kind of line is, did I keep up my average? If you did, if you didn't, if you never laid off any employees, if you never reduced, remember reducing the number of hours your employee works can also impact this, especially if you're taking a full-time employee and making them part-time, because that reduces them. So if you didn't do any of that, if you kept all your employees during your whole covered period, or you brought them all back for the whole covered period, you're good. Check that box. As long as you paid, spent the whole thing and 60% was on payroll and all that, you should be fine. The last thing to check just to make sure is you did not reduce average salary or hourly wages by more than 25%. Again, that's base. That's not commission. That's not all that. It's not variable pay. That's the next thing. As long as you did both of those things, you're fine. You don't have to worry about safe harbor at all. So I know I talk a lot about safe harbor. The only time that you strike the gate to have to go look at safe harbor is if you didn't hit those things during the covered period. If you didn't hire everybody back immediately, if you reduced people's salaries and wages by a lot, that kind of stuff. If you did those, then you might have to worry about safe harbor. But if you didn't, then you're good. Okay. And then timing of when you apply doesn't matter at all, because it's the same today as it is tomorrow, as it was yesterday, right? Like you were fine. So that's important to know. Okay. Now, if that's not you, right? If that's not you, if you didn't bring employees back right away, okay, or something like that, then you may have to go to worrying more about safe harbor. Now, importantly, on the employee side, there are some exceptions that are listed out there. Again, go to some of my videos where I walk through the actual forgiveness application that are out on YouTube. If you couldn't hire, if you tried to hire an employee back and they said no, and then you could not hire a similarly qualified employee. Now you do have to prove that. So there is proof that you would be required to show, like, as of right now anyway, hey, I tried to hire somebody and I couldn't get anybody. Or if an employee asked for less hours, right? All of that you have to have documented. If you don't want it to impact your FTE count during the covered period, you got to document all of that. So that's an important part of this too, just to kind of put that in here too, that there are some exceptions to that FTE. It's not, it's not as cut and dry as I had less than I did before. Therefore, it's a problem. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense that, like, okay, look at your 8 weeks or 24 weeks first. Now, if you're in the middle of your 24 weeks, it does matter. If you haven't applied for forgiveness, it does matter what happens the rest of your 24 weeks. So even if you've kept it up, and this is where the timing gets really frustrating, I think, because a lot of people are in their 24 weeks and they're like, no, but I used it all in 12 weeks and I need to lay some people off, right? Like maybe you're in that spot where you're like, I still don't have work for them to do. And I ran through that PPP money and you want to lay people off. The problem with that is if you've not yet applied for forgiveness, right? You can't draw that line in the sand to say, okay, I was good. I was good during that whole time period. I'm fine. Now I can lay people off. You can't draw that line in the sand until you apply. And banks not taking applications is a bit of a problem for people in that situation who are like, I need to make changes in my business. Doesn't make sense for me to keep all these people, you know? And so that's when you have to kind of weigh the situation. And that's also when you have to look really clearly at safe harbor and see, okay, if I laid people off now and therefore I didn't meet my FTE during the 24 weeks, okay, can I still get safe harbor? And I have a whole video, again, on YouTube that talks about safe harbor. So I've linked the playlist above that's all my PPP stuff, but there's one specifically for employers that explains safe harbor and the ways that you can get it. But real quick, what is safe harbor? Safe harbor means like, look, I didn't do all the things exactly right. And by the letter of the law, they would reduce my forgiveness for it. But it's like the Hail Mary. It's like, okay, but I hired back my employees. I got their salaries back to what they were by December 31st or when I applied for forgiveness. And therefore I'm good. You know, so even if you did everything wrong, safe harbor can help you if you just know those rules. And that's why I harp on it so much. But you don't have to worry about safe harbor. I have so many people that are like, but I followed all the rules. I'm like, awesome. Then you don't have to worry about anything else. And you can do whatever you need to do, right? You don't have to worry about anything else. You can make whatever business decisions you need to that make sense for your business. But if you didn't, make sure you know the rules on safe harbor. Because if you know them, you can get your loan forgiven, okay? And it may even be like, okay, well, I'm gonna wait till the last week of December and hire all those employees back. You can do that and get it forgiven. So go watch that video. Again, we're already 42 minutes in, so I don't want to open that can of worms. When you're ready for the next installment, if you're an employer, the safe harbor video is probably a good one to go watch. Because I walk through and I show you the forgiveness application and what it says about safe harbor and how you get it, right? So I want all of y'all to get 100% forgiven, regardless of whether they pass this blanket forgiveness stuff or not. I don't want y'all worried about it because you know what you need to do. So download the tracker. Okay, if you don't have it, balancecfo.com/PPP tracker. Go get it. Yay, look at this. This is like, I'm doing this at the same time. It's magic / an awesome team. So go download the tracker and then go check out that video and the playlist on all of this. So I hope this helped. It looks like it did. Hopefully, there's so much with PPP. Again, that it's hard to kind of squeeze it into a short amount of time. I don't know if I'd call 45 minutes a short amount of time, but most of y'all stayed this whole time. So I'm proud of you. If you stayed you get a gold star if you stayed the whole time. Okay. So yes, self-employed, safe harbor, not a thing for you. Don't worry about it. Put that out of your mind. And I think just really quick on safe harbor, a lot of people get really confused because safe harbor is just a general term basically for like protection, right? Like you're safe. So there was also a safe harbor rule back at the beginning of all of this, where if you gave your money back by a certain date, right? If you shouldn't have gotten the money to begin with, really more big companies that took it when they shouldn't have, these big public companies that have tons of access to capital, they took that money. They had until a certain date to give it back and get safe harbor. That's a different safe harbor. That was safe harbor that was like, we won't come after you for fraud safe harbor if you give your money back by this point. This safe harbor is you won't get dinged on forgiveness for doing stuff wrong, right? If you follow these couple of rules. So that's the safe harbor that I've been talking about. And there are several different kind of trigger points for that. Also, one of the trigger points for safe harbor too is if you could not hire back all of your employees, right? Because maybe like because of compliance with, or you couldn't get back to the same level of business because of compliance with social distancing and OSHA rules and things like that. If that was the reason that during your covered period you didn't get there, that can also give you safe harbor. So go watch that safe harbor video, because I go into kind of the tricks of how you, and I call them tricks. It's not, it's the rules, but again, it's just understanding the rules that will get you, the forgiveness that you want and need. So go check that out, because there are a lot of little things like that you want to know about. Okay. Let's see. I'm looking to see if there are any new questions. Omar, I answered that question a little bit earlier, but yes, you can transfer it all at once if you want to. It doesn't matter if you're self-employed. Okay. So my bank is saying that my self-employed PPP loan will only be partially forgiven if you choose 8 weeks rather than 24. If you don't have other expenses like rent, business rent, utilities, etc., that's correct, because you can only take 8 weeks of pay, and they gave you 2.5 months worth, right? So if you pick 8 weeks as a self-employed person, you can only take 8 weeks worth of pay. You can't pay yourself the whole thing. You can only pay yourself the whole thing if you pick the 24 weeks. And I recommend that. I don't know why any self-employed person wouldn't pick the 24 weeks, because there's not a drawback to doing that. There really isn't that I can think of. So go watch my video. It's also linked above. There's a video specifically for self-employed people on how to get 100% forgiveness, and it goes into some of the things that we've talked about here in a little bit more detail for self-employed people. So, okay, I've hit my limit. Thank you guys for hanging out. If you have more questions, let me know, but also go check out those videos, because they break down some of these topics that I've touched on in a little bit more specifically. So make sure you get the tracker and go watch those videos. And I will see you guys Friday. I'm doing my Q&A, my normal Q&A, 1:30 Friday, on all things stimulus related, telling you updates of where we are, and also taking your questions on all the stuff. So that's going to be PPP, EIDL, unemployment, stimulus checks, all of that. So we'll talk about that on Friday. Give me a heart, subscribe. Love you guys, and I'll see you later.